Picture a Friday night in 1971. The dishes are done. The living room is quiet. And somewhere across America, in 50 million homes, a television set glows to life, and a brightly painted school bus rolls across the screen, and 5 children start to sing. For 4 years, the Partridge Family was the sound of Friday nights in America. The sound of something safe and warm and simple. 11 million viewers every single week. 50 million records sold around the world. A teenage boy whose face was pinned to the walls of bedrooms from California to London to Tokyo. But behind that painted bus, behind the music, the laughter, and the carefully constructed warmth, several lives were quietly beginning to fracture. One cast member would become the most famous teenager on Earth, and then spend the rest of his life trying to escape what that fame had done to him. Another child star would lose everything: his home, his dignity, his sense of self. And one, the boy who had everything, would spend his final hours whispering 5 words to his daughter that no amount of fame or money or applause had ever been able to silence. So much wasted time. This is what really happened when the music stopped. The premise sounded almost absurd when you said it out loud. A widowed mother, 5 children, a psychedelically painted school bus, and a pop band that somehow kept ending up on stage in a different American city every week. The Partridge Family premiered on ABC on September 25, 1970, and within weeks it had become something nobody had planned for and nobody quite understood. The show was inspired loosely by the Cowsills, a real family pop group who had briefly charmed America, though the Cowsills themselves never saw a dollar from the concept. What the producers had not calculated was the effect of placing a 20-year-old named David Cassidy in front of a camera and asking him to smile. Within 12 months of that first episode, the machinery of American celebrity had done something extraordinary. It had taken a largely unknown young actor from New York and transformed him into a phenomenon so large, so sudden, and so consuming that even the people who built it could not entirely explain how it had happened. At its peak, I Think I Love You spent 3 weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Teen magazines printed his face on their covers month after month after month. The screaming at his concerts was not enthusiasm. It was something closer to hysteria. Something that, if you had been standing at the side of one of those stages, would have frightened you. It frightened David Cassidy. She was already a legend before she ever set foot on the Partridge Family set. Shirley Jones had won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress in 1960 for Elmer Gantry, a role that required her to play a prostitute opposite Burt Lancaster with a rawness and honesty that shocked audiences and stunned the industry. She was 26 years old. She had been in Hollywood for 5 years. And she had just announced, in the most definitive possible terms, that she was not someone to be underestimated. The Partridge Family, a decade later, was a different kind of challenge entirely. As Shirley Partridge, the warm, unshakable center of the fictional family, she was required to be something most serious actresses resist: the steady one, the patient one, the one whose job was to make everyone else look good while absorbing whatever chaos the writers created around her. She made it look effortless, which meant almost nobody noticed how much work it actually was. What viewers could not see was that Jones was simultaneously navigating a personal life of considerable complexity. Her marriage to comedian Marty Ingalls, which began in 1977 and lasted until his death in 2015, was turbulent in ways that the press documented enthusiastically and that she herself wrote about with disarming candor in her 2013 memoir. The public image was composed. The private reality was considerably more complicated. Today, Shirley Jones is 92 years old. At 92, she remains one of the last living connections to a version of Hollywood that simply does not exist anymore. The studio era, the musical, the contract player, the carefully constructed star. She has outlived almost everyone she ever worked with. She speaks about it with the same composure she brought to every role she ever played. Some people age into bitterness. Shirley Jones aged into clarity. Now, the story that changes everything. David Cassidy was born on April 12, 1950 in New York City, the son of actor Jack Cassidy and actress Evelyn Ward. Talent was inherited. Ambition was inherited. And, as it would later become clear, a particular vulnerability to the seductive and destructive properties of fame was also, perhaps, inherited. When he was cast as Keith Partridge, he was 20 years old. Unknown. unformed, still figuring out who he was. He never really got the chance to finish figuring that out. Almost overnight, and that phrase is not an exaggeration, his face was everywhere. Magazine covers, bedroom walls, lunchboxes, television screens, and arenas. Enormous, screaming, terrifying arenas packed with fans who believed, with complete sincerity, that David Cassidy belonged to them personally. He could not eat in a restaurant. He could not walk down a street. He could not exist in public without triggering a response that had more in common with mass hysteria than with ordinary admiration. And then came London, 1974, a concert at the White City Stadium. Hundreds of fans were injured in the crowd crush. A 14-year-old girl named Bernadette Whalen was trampled. She died 4 days later from her injuries. David Cassidy was standing on that stage when it happened. He never performed again at that scale, and he never fully recovered from the guilt of that afternoon. Years later, in interviews, you could still see it on his face when the subject came up, a kind of haunted quality that no amount of therapy or time had completely erased. He had been 24 years old. He had not created the conditions that killed Bernadette Whalen, but he had been there, and she had been there because of him, and that equation never left him. He walked away from the fame deliberately. He cut his hair. He posed nude for Rolling Stone in a move calculated to destroy the teen idol image that had consumed him. He refused to be what the machine wanted him to be. The machine moved on, and David Cassidy was left to discover who he was without it. The answer took decades, and it was never simple. He married 3 times. He battled alcohol, openly, painfully, publicly, across most of his adult life. His relationship with his daughter Katie Cassidy, who became a successful actress in her own right, was fractured by distance and absence for years before they finally reconciled. In 2017, he stood in front of an audience for the last time. He forgot the lyrics mid-song. He lost his place. The people watching saw something they had not expected to see, not a star, but a man. Confused, diminished, frightened. A few months later, he announced the diagnosis publicly. Dementia. He was 67 years old. He said he wanted people to know the truth. That was very David Cassidy, unable to maintain a comfortable fiction when an uncomfortable truth was available. He died on November 21, 2017. Organ failure brought on by liver disease. He was 67 years old. His daughter was with him at the end. His final words to her were these: "So much wasted time." He meant the years of distance between them, the phone calls not made, the birthdays missed, the ordinary moments that fame had taught him to believe were less important than the extraordinary ones, until, at the very end, he understood that he had it exactly backwards. He was the biggest pop star in the world. He died believing he had wasted the life that fame gave him. He was wrong, but he died before he could know that. She was 17 when they cast her. No professional experience, no training, just a face that the camera found immediately, and a quiet intelligence that the writers eventually learned to write toward rather than around. Susan Dey played Laurie Partridge, the oldest daughter, the voice of reason, the one who could always see through her brother's self-importance with a single look. She was born on December 10, 1952, in Pekin, Illinois. What happened after the Partridge Family ended is a story that most people don't know, and should. She refused to be defined by it. She spent years deliberately building a second career that had nothing to do with the painted bus or the teen magazine covers. When L.A. Law arrived in 1986, she was ready, and she was extraordinary. A Golden Globe, 3 Emmy nominations. Critics who had written her off as a television personality were forced to revise their assessments significantly. When David Cassidy died in 2017, she gave a rare interview. She did not speak about the show. She spoke about him. The grief in her voice was immediate and real and entirely unperformed. She is 73 years old today, alive, and largely private, which seems, on reflection, exactly right. He was 11 years old when it started. Danny Bonaduce played Danny Partridge, the wisecracking, scheme-hatching, perpetually underestimated youngest son. He was born on August 13, 1959 in Broomall, Pennsylvania. He was a child, and the entertainment industry, which has never been particularly careful with children, gave him everything and then removed it entirely before he had the tools to survive that removal. The years after the Partridge Family ended were years that Danny Bonaduce has described, with characteristic dark humor, as a masterclass in how not to handle the end of fame. Homelessness, drug addiction, legal trouble, public crises documented in real time. He survived all of it. Not gracefully, not quietly, but he survived. Today he is 66 years old. He works as a radio host in Seattle. He has spoken about his life with an honesty so complete and so unsparing that it became, paradoxically, the most admirable thing about him. He does not pretend the difficult years were less difficult than they were. He does not perform recovery. He simply exists, complicated, clear-eyed, and still here. He once said that the Partridge Family gave him everything and then took it back. The taking back, he said, took longer than the giving. Reuben Kincaid was not a partridge. He was the manager, the long-suffering, perpetually exasperated, deeply reluctant enabler of a family pop band that somehow kept requiring him to do things he found deeply undignified. Dave Madden played him with the particular genius of a comedian who understands that the straightest of straight men is often the funniest person in the room. Born on December 11, 1931 in Berwick, Ontario, Canada, Madden had built his career in stand-up before television offered him something more stable. Reuben Kincaid was the role that made him recognizable, and he inhabited it with a resigned grace that suggested he understood exactly what the character was and was content to do it well. Dave Madden passed away on January 16, 2014. He was 82 years old. Organ failure. He was the first of the main cast to go. He would not be the last. Here is what gets lost in the tragedy. The Partridge Family was genuinely radical. In 1970, when most American television presented families with a father at the center and a mother in support, this show placed a widowed woman completely in control of her life. Shirley Partridge did not need rescuing. She did not need completing. She ran her family, managed her band, solved her problems, and arrived at the end of every episode having handled everything herself. Most viewers did not think of it in those terms. They thought of it as entertainment. But it was there, a quiet argument, made every Friday night for 4 years, that women were capable of being the protagonists of their own stories. The music holds up. I think I love you. I woke up in love this morning. I'll meet you halfway. These are not museum pieces. They are well-made pop songs that sound immediate and alive because they were made by people who genuinely cared about what they were creating. And the bus still exists, painted and preserved. A physical object from a world that is almost entirely gone. 56 years after that bus first rolled across American television screens. This is where the cast stands. Shirley Jones is 92 years old and alive. The last major star standing from a show she anchored with grace and absolute professionalism for 4 years. Susan Dey is 73 and alive, having built a second life that proved, definitively, that she was always more than the show that discovered her. Danny Bonaduce is 66 and alive, carrying every scar from the difficult years openly, without apology or performance. Dave Madden, the long-suffering Reuben Kincaid, left us in 2014 at 82. Patient and funny until the end. And David Cassidy, Keith Partridge, the biggest teen idol the world had ever seen, the boy whose face was on a million bedroom walls, died in November 2017 at 67, whispering to his daughter that he had wasted too much time. He was wrong. He gave millions of people something that stayed with them, something they carried into their adult lives, into their own families, into quiet Friday evenings when they hear a particular song on the radio and feel, for just a moment, like they are 17 again and the world is simple and the future is everything. That is not wasted time. That is a life that mattered. So much wasted time. That is what he said. He was wrong. If this story moved you, if it brought back something you had almost forgotten, please leave a comment below and tell us what the Partridge Family meant to you. We read every single one. Subscribe for more stories about the people who shaped American television and the lives they lived away from the cameras.